643. Now, this is really a pleasure, and I mean that in the truest sense. That I want to welcome a longtime educator, a person who was is befriended the Curtis Report, and he's part of our Patriot Network of Schools. It is a pleasure to introduce the Commandant of Fishburne Military Academy, Colonel Gary Morrison. Colonel Morrison, welcome back to the Curtis Report.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. I'm glad to be back.
And happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to you. Did you have a good one?
We are having a good one, and I appreciate you being on the air with us on Father's Day. I know that's a major commitment. I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
We have, and you've been on the show before, so I personally am acquainted with Fishburne Military School via our contact with you. Tell us a little bit about, for our new viewers, because we're on a different station now, much broader audience. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Fishburne Military School.
Okay, so I am the superintendent at Fishburne Military School in Waynesboro, Virginia. It is a small, private military high school with a very traditional approach to just about everything: education, character building, child rearing, essentially. And what we do is we take kids from all over the world and we put them in leadership positions and challenge them and strengthen them and educate them. And for the last decade, we've had 100% college placement. And
so what does that mean specifically? Now, you're saying that literally your graduates there, 100% of them go on to college?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
You do have a few that are placed and they get accepted, and they will decide to go on to the military first in order to gain some more maturity and assist in funding for college. But every graduate for the last 10 years has been accepted. I would say with each year, I guess the exceptions are one or two that go on to the military. And we are obviously very, very proud of those young men for joining and serving their country right away out of high school.
Now you're no novice to education. You've got a long history of being an educator there in the Virginia area, correct?
Yes, sir. I've been with Fishburne for 17 years. I was a cadet there for 4 years, taught for 5 years. I was their admissions director for 7 years, and then returned in October to be their director, president/superintendent. And but I've always been in education. I've been a career development specialist. I've written a book on career development. I've keynoted the Pennsylvania Department of Education's annual conference to train educators on, what the real world needs out of our high school population, or how we might better train them. So I've spent my whole life in education of some sort.
So now this, you characterize this as being a small school. I'm sure there's some advantages to that. About how many students do you have on enrolled in your school? And explain that we got campus living here on school, right? On campus.
Yes, sir. We have the maximum capacity for the school is 200, and we have usually anywhere from 20 to 25 day students. Those would be students that commute, but they have to complete the full program during the day before they head back home.
Let me ask you, how does the general public, in your opinion, view single-sex education? What do you think? What's the perception out there about single-sex education?
The amazing thing is that we see, obviously, a lot of support for it. Teenage boys and teenage girls are at that point in their life when they have to make this huge investment in their future. And the problem with today's society is we're, relationship obsessed. People become overwhelmed with the idea of, being a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Guys obviously get distracted from what they need to be doing in these incredibly critical years by that need to have a girlfriend or some sort of relationship. And more and more people are starting to realize the value of single-sex education, whether that mean an all-female environment or all-male environment.
But you know, but isn't Colonel? Isn't it? It doesn't the fact remain that there's still relatively few same-sex schools in the nation's public education system, as far as the public education is concerned.
Yeah, I honestly could not tell you one that is in public. That's why if you run across single-sex education, it's going to be in private education.
Right.
So schools that are completely independent of any sort of intervention by the government or intervention by pressures, to change. We're a traditional school. We're owned by our alumni association, a branch of the alumni association, essentially, and that branch sacrifices a great deal of donation, time, talent to make sure that the school stays open and that we can maintain that traditional single-sex approach to education.
Awesome. And just and I want you to hold over. We're about to take a break here in just a little bit, and when we come back, what I want to do here, just very briefly, is to talk about, in the general sense, what is there any trend toward folks getting behind single-sex education at all, or is this simply a novelty that we're just going to find in private school areas? I want to kind of discuss that and other things when we come back very briefly. Again, we're speaking to Colonel Morrison, the Fishburne Military School, and we'll be right back with more of the Curtis Report.
We are talking about American exceptionalism. Get involved with the conversation. Call in with your questions at 888-787-KLIF. It's about family, faith, and freedom. Now, let's get back to the Curtis Report with our host, Barry Curtis.
Thanks, and welcome back to the Curtis Report. We have on the line Colonel Gary Morrison, and he's with Fishburne Military School, Fishburne Military Academy, and that is in Virginia. It's same-sex, all-boys school in Virginia, and we're speaking to him about Fishburne Military School. Really a fascinating slant on that education. Before we went to the break, Colonel Morrison, what it indicated, my question just in a general sense, was that is there any movement at all out there in the general populace as far as in public education is concerned to do anything with same-sex schools? Yeah,
it's funny that you should mention it. I have not read or heard about schools going single-sex, but there have been experiments with the idea of making classrooms single-sex. Rare and it's experimental, but it has been discussed and it has been tried. To what success, I don't know.
Yeah, and these and obviously it's yeah. I think that in a public setting, in a public type, I wouldn't know how that would work to a large degree.
It's very, very difficult to do. Again, it's an old school concept, and like so many old school concepts, when they are left behind, people begin to realize, hey, that was a good model.
Right.
And all of a sudden, everything that was old becomes new again. So, it is being revisited in an experimental fashion, but only in that I know of, only in classroom settings.
Let's get more specifically to Fishburne Military School. You've got about 200 boys on campus there. Describe campus life.
The young men, they get up, most of them get up before Reveille, but they have Reveille around 7 o'clock. They raise the colors. They all assemble for the raising of the colors. They briefly head into a cleanup formation. They're all responsible for various areas of the campus that they have to clean up. They then head off to breakfast shortly after breakfast, and they march into everything. They assemble just as if they were in the Army, and they run through classes until lunch. They have another formation. Inspection is done where they inspect the shoes, the brass, haircut, shave, everything that would go along with being in a uniform.
Let me ask you, you talked about raising the colors, raising the flag. Besides the obvious in that incredible act, What does that do for the young men on campus? What does that instill in them? What does that mean, apart from the obvious tradition? What does that give to them?
Respect. And it's one thing that they are constantly reminded of. Even if they come from overseas and join our Corps, they will salute the flag, and every morning they are expected to remember why we're saluting that flag, and that's because we live in a nation that's free, and that freedom was not free. It was paid for by the blood and the sacrifice of soldiers, both men and women, throughout the history of this country. And every day we need to stop and we need to give thanks to each and every one of those veterans, not just one day a year.
Amen,
we do it
brother.
every day.
Amen. Let me ask you, last Thursday here in Texas, Governor Rick Perry signed into law, I think it was House Bill 305 or 308, which allowed in public schools teachers the right now legally to refer to Christmas holidays, Hanukkah, these in the traditional sense as far as holidays are concerned. Tell me how faith fits in there on campus at Fishburne Military School.
You know, it's a funny thing, and it can be touchy, but it doesn't have to be touchy. Fishburne does not have a religious denomination, but we're in a very small Virginia town that is right in the heart of the Bible Belt. So we're surrounded by churches, and the bells quite often remind you when it's noon, and the boys are required to attend a service, and that can be a Catholic service, that can be Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, whatever religious denomination they happen to be. And those that are not a member of those denominations, we facilitate their worship in their fashion. And if a student cannot go off campus, they're required to attend what we call a chapel formation, and that is essentially a non-denominational meeting every Sunday morning that covers some of the principles that are so valuable and so clearly presented in a church.
Well, let me ask you, how does we've talked about faith and freedom, and our other a factor we talk about here a lot, the family. Tell us about the family involvement on campus there. Do these boys come from traditional two-parent homes? Are there exceptions to that? How's the family involved with this?
We are very family-oriented. The families are welcome to communicate. The families are welcome to visit. Obviously, those families that live closer will come in and they'll stay more involved with the kids. The beauty of it is that a great deal of our families, especially the more local families, will come in, and if they're going to take their son out to dinner or just take them off campus for a couple hours to unwind, there's a long-lived tradition at Fishburne that you take your roommate and friends with you. So
everybody gets a meal out of that thing. That's a good thing. Let me ask you more about life there on campus. Do you characterize your school as a strict school? How would you characterize there?
We are strict but forgiving. It is the nature of the teenage boy to be impulsive, and while we're strict, you don't want to cross that line where you oppress and you crush the spirit of the young man. So if there is correction to be made, and with the rules that we have and the military structure that we have, there are constantly corrections to be made. You make those corrections followed by a lesson, followed by a handshake, and you move on.
I like that. Colonel Morrison, we're running out of time just a little bit. A couple of things here. One, tell us about, and I know when we talked last year, I was just fascinated by this. Tell us about the cell phones.
The cell phones and internet communication have become so prevalent, and they're so alluring to kids because it does allow them to communicate with just about everybody that they know, and it has become a huge problem because kids, instead of doing the things, again, that we mentioned before that they're supposed to be doing, focusing on academics, developing character, exercising, playing sports, doing all that, they become obsessed with electronics, including phones. So
Right.
what we do is we allow the parents to bring a son's cell phone, and that cell phone is kept they're kept in lockers, essentially, in the commandant's office.
Right.
And on the weekends, when they do have downtime, they get to have a little bit of the real world back and get their cell phone for the weekend, and then those phones have to be turned in Sunday when we're ready to get back to work.
That's got to be a novel idea. I mean, taking a teenager's cell phone, that's got to be, an amazing thing. You're doing some good stuff there. We're running out of time here. How do we get more information about Fishburne Military School, and how do we reach you?
There's the best way is to go to our website, which is www.fishburn.org, and you can reach out to any member of the staff from there.
Again, that website is
www.fishburn.org.
Awesome. I mean, you're doing some good things there, Colonel. We appreciate you being back here on the Curtis Report. Now, you got to give them their smartphones and internet so they can listen to the Curtis Report on the weekends, right?
Actually, we have Wi-Fi.
Okay.
The modern trend in technology is that kids have to be able to study using portable electronic devices, or they go to college like cavemen. Now, it's strictly controlled, and there's a number of IT solutions that can be developed for that, and we use them all. But they have to be trained in how to do that if they're to properly be prepared for college.
Absolutely. Colonel Morrison, we appreciate your time here on the Curtis Report again. You're part of our Patriot Network of schools, so we'll be back with you again here, I'm sure, in a month or two or three, kind of checking in with you, seeing what we got going on as we get closer back to the new fall season. Colonel Morrison, we appreciate that. Thanks for being with us here on the Curtis Report.
Mr. Curtis, thank you for letting us be part of your family.
Thank you, sir. You have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Colonel Morrison.